The day had begun just like any other for Mr. Memulus. He'd woken up bright and early at 7 in the morning to his henchman carrying in his breakfast. Mr. Memulus was not someone to be trifled with before he got his bowl of oats, so the scrawny boy hurried in and addressed him with the utmost politeness.
Mr. Memulus, sir. Good morning, sir.
The boy laid down the platter on Mr. Memulus's lap with shaking hands. He'd only recently been promoted to Mr. Memulus's errand boy after years of working hard in the London Mafia, and was nervous to make a good impression for 2 reasons. 1 dash he hoped to someday hold a powerful position within the Mafia, and 2 dash he'd been told countless times of the gruesome fate of the man who'd come before him who dared to make a mistake in the presence of Mr. Memulus. "Thank you, Al. I'm afraid, though, that it isn't a good morning," replied the hulking mass of the Mafia boss as he devoured his meal.
Oh, why is that, sir? Is there anything I can do?
"One of my men decided to take it upon himself to kidnap the chief of police last night. Now, I've got to take care of both of them." He went back to his meal until an idea popped into his head. "Have you ever killed a man, Al?"
No, sir. I can't say that I have.
Mr. Memulus grinned maliciously. "Well, then today's your lucky day. You'll take care of the traitor for me."
Yes, sir. Of course, sir.
The boy fidgeted at the side of the bed, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't lying when he said he'd never killed anyone, and he didn't know that he ever really wanted to, which seemed strange for someone who wanted to be in the Mafia. "Get on with it, then," snapped Mr. Memulus, who pulled a gun from his dresser and handed it to the boy. The boy jumped and scurried out of the room, grasping the gun with the tenderness of one who has just been handed a newborn baby. George Memulus smiled to himself at his own cleverness and finished his breakfast as he pondered all of the wonderful ways in which he could torture Chief Lenny. Well, Lenny woke up rather grumpy with a throbbing headache. He didn't know where he was, but he knew he wasn't at home in his soft, warm bed, though he desperately wished he was. He opened his eyes with some difficulty and found that he was tied down to a chair in the center of a small room whose walls dripped with condensation that sent a chill straight to his bones. The single light above his head flashed incessantly, doing nothing to help his head, and the ropes he'd been tied with cut deep into his wrists and ankles and gut, making it hard to breathe. Just as he was beginning to get his bearings, the door creaked open and his worst nightmare stomped in. "Well, well, well, what had we here? Mr. Will Lenny, a pleasure as always." Dragging a chair from a corner of the room, Mr. Memulus took a seat in front of his prisoner.
"Memulus,"
spat Will. "Oh, come on now." Mr. Memulus barred his teeth in a grin. "We've had some good conversations in the past. We're friends now. Call me George."
"What do you want?"
"I didn't want anything, but apparently one of my boys decided I did. Don't worry, though, we'll find a use for you, Mr. Chief of Police." Will let out a raucous laugh that sent the guards reaching for their guns, and George glaring in anger at the man. "What's so funny?" questioned Memulus.
"I'm hurt, George."
Will stared into the man's eyes.
"I thought we were friends, but you haven't heard the big news, I take it?"
"Afraid not. Sorry." George apologized, and there was almost a hint of sincerity in it.
"I'm not the chief anymore. In fact, I'm not even an officer. I've been booted from the department."
Mr. George Memulus was shocked at the news. He stood from his chair and paced around the room, not sure what to do next. He could always kill him. It would be easier to cover up now, but it would still be more work than Memulus wanted to put in. He looked over at Will, taking in the sight of him for the first time. The way he slouched in the chair, too exhausted to hold himself up. If it weren't for the ropes, he'd have collapsed onto the ground. Will looked up at George with bloodshot eyes and a sunken face. He was skinnier than George had remembered. He was confused by the pity he felt for the disgraced cop and by what it drove him to say next. "I have a proposition for you, Lenny." Memulus stood with his hands folded carefully in front of him and a mischievous glint in his eyes. "There may be a position opening soon as long as my boy Al has done his job. I'd love to have you on the team." Will looked at the man as if he'd gone mad.
"You really think that after all these years I'd work for you? You're a criminal, a murderer and a thief."
George sauntered over to Will and crouched down until they were at eye level. He raised his hand to Will's face and forced him to look into his eyes.
Listen, Will,
Began George.
I don't want to have to kill you, but I will. You either accept my proposal or...
His voice trailed off as he lowered his hand to clasp around Will's neck, squeezing tighter and tighter until the smaller man was forced to beg him to stop.
Fine.
Will could barely believe what he was saying as he struggled to catch his breath.
What do you want me to do, boss?
George stood with a grin.
First, get cleaned up. You looked like you were dragged down a street.
I was, Will thought.
When you're finished with that, my men here will escort you to lunch with me where we'll discuss your new duties.
George turned to walk out the room, but before he opened the door he turned back.
Don't think of it as a job. Think of it as two friends helping each other out.
He gave a wink and then added,
Oh, and killing you's still not off the table. You mess up, you're dead. Got it?
George had said it with great authority, but something about the way the man looked at him told Will that deep down Mr. George Mamulus could never hold himself to that promise. As he watched the larger man leave, Will realized he was feeling something strange, something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope.